Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Hassan with another episode of the Influence Continuum. And I am absolutely delighted to have a friend and a colleague that I've known for a bunch of years finally come on the Influence Continuum. Ravi Chandra is a psychiatrist, writer, compassion educator in San Francisco, and a distinguished fellow of the American Psychiatric Association. Received his Psi B with honors from Brown University and MD from Stanford University School of Medicine, completed residency in general adult psychiatry from the University of California, San Francisco. You write a blog for Psychology Today, Eastwind eZine. You wrote essays on film for the Center for Asian American Media for 14 years. And you regularly teach at American Psychiatric Association and other venues where I am proud to say you invited me to be on your panels for a few years. And you really are an activist and someone with grounded values. So I respect and admire you so much. And you did a nonfiction book, Face Buddha, Transcendence in the Age of Social Networks, which won a 2017 Nautilus Silver Award. You did a debut documentary feature, The Bandaged Place from AIDS to COVID, and Rachel Justice, which was awarded Best Film of 2021 Cannes Independent Film Festival. And they're both online. And Ravi, you've been wanting to get the American Psychiatric Association to look at some of their positions and policies, in particular, the Goldwater rule, which was used to really censor distinguished psychiatrists like Bandy Lee, who wrote The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, New York Times best-selling book, 37 luminaries weighed in. And the APA came out and said, no, you can't diagnose somebody from afar, which Bandy said, we're not diagnosing. We have a duty to warn. Mm-hmm. And so I want to circle back to why it's so important for the public to understand this topic, the fact that a lot of institutions have been co-opted by whether it's big pharma or other financial incentives, turning their back to the public good and what the public really needs. So I've said enough. And now I want to introduce you to my audience, Ravi Chandra.
Well, thank you, Steve. And it's such a pleasure to be here with you. And yes, it's been great to know you for several years. And yes, and I invited you once you came to one of our panel discussions along with psychoanalyst Dr. Nancy Hollander, who presented last year at the APA on megalomania and cults in the American psyche. Mm-hmm. And this year, I had invited you again with what seemed like an all-star panel with you and Ruth Ben-Ghiat of NYU, who's written Strong Men, and also Felicia Prato, who is a social psychologist at University of Connecticut and an expert on social dominance orientation. And I thought this would be just a standout presentation and vital for the APA in the election year, and obviously had stellar people, experts in their field. But I was very surprised and shocked when it was turned down. And I heard through the underground network that there was a general dislike of politically themed sessions at this year's APA. In fact, only one directly political topic on conspiracy theories by John Rozelle and Joseph Pierre went forward. And it was fantastic. It was overflow. It went into an extra room. It was so popular. And they'd presented on it before as well. But that was the only one. And apparently that one actually had a lot of feedback, and it was almost didn't go through itself. So it tells you something has changed within the APA. And part of that is the Goldwater rule, which we'll talk about. And I think part of it is just a fear of engaging with the times and a fear of triggering blowback from political actors. There's
Mm.
all of that, and I think it's all essentially uh, promoting a complicity with the dominant culture, the dominating culture, and avoiding the
Yeah.
challenges which are really going to are affecting mental health, and which come in direct conflict with the APA's stalwart initiative. And the APA is a great organization. I really love the APA. I've been a member for over 20 years. They've had this program on the social determinants of mental health, which directly talk about the impacts of racism and abusive power, racism, sexism, homophobia, etc., on mental health. And if we can't talk about how leaders and how political institutions really create the conditions for racism, all the other isms, and violence, then what are we doing? And the APA has been
Right.
kind of, wishy-washy about this, but they've issued pronouncements reiterating the Goldwater rule in 2017 and again this year. So,
Mm.
this is a really difficult topic, and I think a lot of psychiatrists, which we can talk about as well, really oppose the Goldwater rule. So, just to give people the background, so the Goldwater rule is named after Barry Goldwater, who ran for president against Lyndon Johnson in 1964. Well, a few months before the election, the publisher of Fact magazine, which was only in circulation for I think a couple of years,
Mm.
Fact magazine put out a survey to a list of psychiatrists it obtained from the AMA. They put out the survey with one question: do you think Barry Goldwater is fit to be president of the United States? They sent it out to 12,000
Mm-hmm.
psychiatrists. Only about 2,000 responded, about 20% responded, and they were pretty split. I mean, I think about a third of them said, I don't have enough information, and half said no, and half said yes, something like that. So, but they
Mm-hmm.
reported it in very sensationalistic terms and derogatory terms. And to be noted, these 2,000 psychiatrists or so who responded, the 20% who responded, they weren't experts in social psychology. They weren't experts in evaluating public figures or political leaders, et cetera. They were just a random sample of psychiatrists. So really
Right.
problematic about who you ask, and just doing a survey. But it was an episode of professional embarrassment for
Mm.
psychiatry in general. And so an appeals court basically ruled in favor of Barry Goldwater. It was essentially defamatory. He got a $1 judgment, but a $75,000 compensation or something. And in effect, it shut down Fact magazine. I think it had shut down before that. But then the
Mm.
APA pretty quickly brought, part of its first code of ethics in 1973 issued Section 7.3, which, basically to summarize, it's a paragraph, but to summarize, it says psychiatrists should not diagnose from a distance. They should not offer professional opinions without personal examination and evaluation and without consent of the person
Mm.
you've interviewed. So those are the bases of what's was then called the Goldwater rule.
Mm-hmm.
And this is this is continued. It's become now Dr. Alan Dyer was one of the people who initially participated in the creation of this code of ethics. And he said that these were all meant to be guidelines, not absolutes.
Right.
And he said, but this one in particular became a thou shalt not, kind of an 11th commandment, if you will.
Hmm.
And so has increasingly become, so weighty in psychiatric discourse that it effectively shuts down political examination, social psychology before we even get started.
Right.
And there was a huge debate in 2017 at the APA with Claire Pouncey, a bioethicist, ethicist and scholar, independent scholar, Nasir Gaimi, who's a psychiatrist. He's now president of the Massachusetts Psychiatric Association, and also two past presidents of the APA, Doctors Paul Applebaum and Paul Summergrad. And to me, there was a full auditorium, and to me, Doctors Pouncey and Gaimi just had fantastic arguments for basically eliminating the Goldwater rule because first of all, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, but Paul Summer, I respect both of them. I've worked with Paul Applebaum. I mean, Paul Applebaum's a wonderful human being and very compassionate person. But I think he represents he and the other APA president Paul Summergrad represented organizational psychiatry at the time. And they really shut down the debate and really didn't really take on, in my view, the substantive issues posed by Pouncey and Gaimi. And actually, Claire Pouncey, along with Jerome Kroll, wrote a very fantastic scholarly article, which is available. We can get you the link for it, but it's the ethics of the Goldwater rule in the Journal of Psychiatry and the Law. And so, I mean, they're very clear about this, that the Goldwater rule, as I just wrote an essay that I submitted to the APA's bodies, and my title was "The Goldwater Rule Holds No Water, but Carries Water for Oppression." And they basically made a lot of these arguments that, this idea that you can only diagnose or offer a professional opinion with personal evaluation. Well, that's suspect because we do things like that all the time without personal evaluation. And the idea that you shouldn't offer an opinion without consent of the person you've examined, that's also suspect because you don't have a treatment relationship with a public figure, and you have other duties of conscience which might compel you to speak out about dangerous qualities and kind of connect the dots for the public to help them make an informed, reasonable decision. Now, Kroll and Pouncey and Dr. Gaimi, obviously, I mean, nobody wants to go out there and just name call. Nobody wants to stigmatize people with mental health disorders. And we can be educated to not do that. But it's also, there's a duty to warn and a duty to inform, which are, paramount in our ethics. And we are living in a very dangerous age, as you said. And I think the public would benefit from more scholarly, reasoned advice. And I think rather than detracting from the standing of psychiatry, this would enhance potentially the standing of psychiatry within the population. Because if you're being responsible, I think when we're abdicating our responsibility to the public, who's going to trust us, right? I'm a very public psychiatrist. Right. I write a lot. I'm very transparent. Even in my therapy, I'm pretty transparent, although I always explore political beliefs and so forth. But people know where I am,
right?
So yeah,
right.
So that's the thumbnail.
So what I'd like to add, that's fantastic. Thank you for that summary. What I'd also like to add is that forensic psychiatrists who are trained are obligated to be truth tellers. In other words, if they're hired to render a professional opinion, they don't choose, I'll do what the lawyers that are hired by the plaintiff or the defendant, what they want. They look at the facts, and their obligation is to the truth and to the court. And so I would suggest that forensic psychiatrists are in a higher category of integrity, and also they get cross-examined. So anything they say or do that borderline affects their ethical standing and integrity is going to be called to account. So I wanted to say that. And then I want to just say for Bandy Lee, who's a forensic psychiatrist whose expertise is dangerousness, from what she's told me, she rarely gets to meet the people that she says are dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
but she looks for specific behaviors. Like when someone says, I could stand on the corner of Fifth Avenue and kill someone, and my followers would still follow me. That's a big red flag of danger. Who would even think to say that, much less boast it? And and she and many other forensic psychiatrists said exactly what you were saying. We're not diagnosing him. We're saying that there's a duty to warn this person is not fit for office. And they were calling for a bipartisan panel of forensic psychiatrists to do the evaluation. So not Republican, not Democrat, no bias, just like not one person. But when we're talking about the most powerful position, political position in the world, President of the United States, there's a duty to warn. And everything that she and Robert Lifton, one of my top mentors who helped rescue me from the Moonies with his Chinese communist brainwashing stuff, Gilligan, all these other luminaries have been saying this is going to get worse if he's not held accountable.
Absolutely.
And he hasn't been held accountable. He just got pronounced guilty in state court in New York State of 34 felons, which means he can't pardon himself if he does wind up getting elected president. But nevertheless, he's now talking about weaponizing the Justice Department, going after Democrats who oppose him, using the Heritage Foundation 2025 playbook to basically only put into power people who are yes people, which is what a dictator seeks to do. And how is that not the responsibility of a body of psychiatrists committed to the well-being of society? How can they say, no, we should stay out of politics? I don't get it.
Right. Well, exactly. And we have our observations. Forensic psychiatrists, social psychiatrists, specializing in social psychology, can understand these people on, I think, a deeper level than the average person. And you're obviously an expert because you know about mind control, manipulation, and all of this.
And
And
malignant
malignant narcissism. Right,
narcissists,
right,
which is
exactly.
the stereotypical profile of every cult leader that
Mhm,
I've ever worked, whose people were victimized by these
mhm,
people.
exactly.
It's a
Yeah.
stereotypical profile. And Eric Fromm, who came up with that, he was trying to come up with criteria for Hitler.
Right,
Like what?
right,
When he was
right.
elected, by the way, Hitler was
Mhm,
elected.
mhm,
People forget. People voted
mhm.
for him
Yeah.
to be Führer.
Right. Well, so that brings up a whole range of topics, including like how do followers get primed, or what kinds of people look for these kinds of leaders. So there's a lot of psychological analysis which would be helpful for us to help us just understand each other as Americans. Like, why are
Yes.
these people? And it turns out the strongest predictor for voting for Trump in 2016 was ethnic isolation. So people with in the zip codes with the least diversity, the most white, were most likely to vote for Trump. Okay, so right, right. So
Fascinating.
that's interesting, and people who are more authoritarian. And who have social dominance orientation, those are also much more likely to vote for Trump. So this is a way of understanding each other. Now, Gordon Allport, a famous psychiatrist, talked about the contact theory of contact hypothesis of bias and diffusing bias and prejudice. And he says basically a benign intergroup contact with shared activity toward a mutual goal. That is the best way to overcome bias. And the
Yep.
people from these ethnically isolated enclaves are, perhaps they're fearful of change. They've been geared and primed to be more fearful by Fox News,
Right.
conservative media, like the immigrants are coming to kill you, rape you, take your jobs, all this horror, and they don't have experience with immigrants so much, and people like me,
Right.
right? They don't see people like me. They don't see minorities, and so they might believe the worst about people they don't even know. So it's very canny, and then they're looking, the people who have this social dominance orientation, authoritarian. They also tend to be, according to recent personality studies, Trump voters tend to be, quote unquote, highly self-disciplined, or what I would call rigid. So they look for somebody who basically gives them marching orders, and they
Mm.
really glue to that. And so, so this is right down the line. So we need to understand these things, not to condemn these people. It's just like there are ways to reach these people and understand them,
Exactly.
so.
Yeah, exactly. And if I may opine, you're the psychiatrist. I have a master's in psychology, but I really look at the influence continuum graphic of
Mhm.
ethical to unethical. And ethical parenting, the parents look at their children as unique beings, and that their job as parents is to help them to grow to maturity, to become their own best self.
Mhm.
And authoritarian parents use corporal punishment typically, and they want their kids to be clones. They want them to have the same religion, and very black and white, all or nothing, good versus evil thinking. So the way I see this is it's kind of a developmental feature that people are rigid
Mhm.
and looking for an authority figure to
Right.
tell them how to think or what to do, especially in times of fear and stress
Yeah.
and uncertainty.
Right, and his voters. I mean, I certainly am. We should be very warned by Trump's statement. I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, but that's actually proven to be true. It's hard. And people, kind of, I just heard on the PBS NewsHour. It was just a focus group, and people were, or sorry, it was a Brookings Institution focus group, and people were basically just. Willing to excuse, oh, he just says things. He's being dramatic or theatrical. He knows how to get attention, but he'll do the policies, the economic or immigration policies, which will benefit me or the country or whatever. So it's like they're willing to excuse these things. And so that fits in line with these kind of people who need a hero or a savior for their particular cause, are willing to discount the confirmation bias or whatever. They're like, right, it's
Yeah,
like, oh, that
exactly.
doesn't matter. All that matters is this. And they even ignore the actual effects of what he actually did, taking away
Right.
healthcare from millions, all this, the COVID crisis, all of these things, which, clearly demonstrated he was not an effective leader. So we need to kind of understand what he's tapping into as well. Because I think, beyond just warning about the population, I think, this demonstrates a real problems within the social psyche, which if we're going to be e
Yeah,
pluribus unum, out of many one, we've got to talk to each other. We've got to understand each other. And for me, the
exactly.
demographic change is wonderful. I love my San Francisco, where I can get on the bus. I'll hear English, Cantonese, Tagalog, Vietnamese, on the public, the loudspeaker, announcing instructions, etc. And I worked at a clinic for many years where almost 30 languages were spoken by the patients. That
Mm.
was incredible. I mean, it makes
Yeah,
me feel safe, as a minoritized person, to like, okay, here's a place that can hold diversity. I mean, there's problems. There's hate crimes here too. So I don't want to soft pedal it, but and my mom lived in Rome, Georgia, for 30 years. I don't think she would mind me telling you she loved it there. The people were nice and kind, and if I needed help in the middle of the night, I could wake up my neighbors and they would come help me. That's the kind of good people she felt they were. However, 85% of them voted for Trump, and they sent Marjorie Taylor Greene to the Congress. So there is a real disconnect. I mean, they're really pulling the levers against people like me and her, yet they can be the nicest people. I mean, there's this disconnect. So how do we
Right.
recognize our politics are an expression of how we feel about each other?
So I want to just say I met your mom in San Francisco at the APA. I love your mom. She's so cool, so bright, and so proud of you.
Oh, thank you.
And what my take is, and people say, Steve, the hammer only sees the nail. Maybe there's some truth to it, but I just see how minds are being manipulated online and in media. And a lot of people don't recognize the techniques and tactics that are being used on them. And I named a bunch of them in the Cult of Trump book, such as projection. Like Trump tried to do a coup, but he blames Biden on doing a coup.
Right.
Trump wants to be a dictator. He blames Biden on being a dictator. And the demonization of the other is a major mind control device. And people often are choosing to vote for Trump because they're so afraid of what has been put into their brain about the Democrats and Joe Biden. I mean, remember QAnon, the Democrats were pedophiles trafficking children in the basement of Comet Pizza.
Right.
People were actually believing this stuff. So one needs to have perspective. One needs to step back, look at data, and not just go with what everyone in your town is saying who they're going to vote for, but actually think about our children and our children's children. And when they say they want to make America great again, we're a nation of immigrants. And people forget Donald Trump's name, his family name. Do you know what it is?
Drumpf.
Ravi?
Drumpf. Yeah.
Drumpf. Can you imagine voting for Donald Drumpf? D-R-U-M-P-F.
Right.
No. Right. But his family was immigrants too. And so I talk to people in the Midwest who are like, we need help. By this immigration policy, we're not getting our farms taken care of properly. We need workers who are willing to work. And these policies are very short-sighted, and we're way past the idea of an isolationist America. That's what the Nazis wanted when Hitler wanted to take over the world. They were spending lots of money here, recruiting Christian Front, through the Catholic chaplain and his radio show with 15. They were saying, stay out of Europe. Let's just stick with what's important to America. Why? Because they were being influenced, and militias were being trained to do a physical coup in 1940 in Washington, D.C., according to Rachel Maddow's book, Prequel. Well-researched book. So, again, what I want to come back to is we all are one people. We need to start thinking about a long-term plan for how to stay a United States and understand who are the bad actors who are deliberately wanting conflict and chaos. The Steve Bannons, the Roger Stones, the Alex Joneses, the Christian nationalists, the extremists, the Nazis. They don't want, and I'll say fossil fuel corporations like Coke and countries that want to push, they want to deny climate science, that we really are heating up the earth and it's causing catastrophic weather events that should never be happening with the frequency that they are. We need to like open our eyes and see who these bad actors are doing and not just get distracted or say there's nothing we can do about it, because we actually can do things, but we have to stand up and say, I can do this. I may not be able to do more, but if I network with others and we pool our resources and our intelligence and our natural resources together, we need to overwhelmingly win in November, and not just the presidency, but the Senate and the Congress, because then we have a chance to reclaim laws, to put back rule of law.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I even as much as I've learned and I'm still learning about psychology, I am mystified and horrified why this is a close election at all. I mean, it should not be. But I think that just tells us there's a some deep currents in American history. From the founding, from the arrival of European colonists, that have kind of influenced who wants to stay in top, who feels they have status and wants to remain with status and wealth and power and all of that. And so Isabel Wilkerson talked about caste, and the dominance of the white male Christian folks. And now, Trump is basically opening the door to a white ethno-nationalist state, which is superficially Christian in name. But, they're not talking about putting the Beatitudes up on classroom walls. Jesus doesn't even come into it. It's the 10 Commandments for some reason. For some reason, kindergartners need to see the world, thou shalt not commit adultery. Somehow that's important rather than love thy neighbor. And, it just doesn't even make sense. It's all about content.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
But I'll argue from my research for the cult of Trump, Ravi, that there are actual authoritarian cults that are influencing 40 million Americans, if not more, who are in these groups where they think that they have a prophet or an apostle who speaks directly to God, and speaks in tongues and can supposedly cast out demons. I did a very interesting interview with a young gay man who had been subjected to exorcisms over and over again, traumatized him horribly. In any case, they claim these supernatural powers, and it's them that people are fearful that if they don't follow their apostle blindly, they're going to be possessed by demons themselves.
Scary.
And it's these people who said Trump won the election because God told them he won. So, let's ignore all of the evidence and all of the Trump-appointed officials who said, no, Trump lost.
Well, this is
not just white people.
Right. Exactly. No, I agree. But, clearly Trump's policies, the Project 2025 playbook and all of that, that's clearly meant for, Christian white elitism. But that's true. But what you're talking about, this influence continuum, the cult, mind control, authoritarian stuff, those are things which psychiatrists should be educated about, which we should be able to talk to our patients about. I think you've talked about this, is there have been many misdiagnoses of people who were in fact coming out of cult systems, and they get misdiagnosed with something and not helped until I think that was your story. You stepped in and you kind of understood what was happening. So I think that's the same thing for our population, is we've got to deconstruct and the negative influences and really start to promote positive influences. And one of these is expertise, trust in institutions, in experts, with reasonable questioning. The scientific method is not a religion. Or rather, science is not a religion. It's falsifiable. We have to question our experts. We have to bring in interdisciplinary work and so forth. So that's all. The questioning is very important. But what Trump he has been very skilled. I think he knows what he's doing. He's like saying, don't trust any of the experts. I know better than the generals. I know better than doctors. I know better than Fauci. It's like, it's totally absurd. I mean, I think humility and empathy should be basic criteria for any leadership position, wherever you are. I mean, whatever position,
Yeah.
especially for president of the United States. And so
Yeah.
this is just, it's crazy. But again, all those people, which you mentioned, the 40 million, who are just willing to just trust someone who anoints themselves as a spokesperson.
Well, they've been mind controlled, in my opinion, and it's very systematic. Do you know who William Lind is in fourth generation warfare?
I don't remember that name, but go ahead. Yeah.
So I wrote about it in The Cult of Trump, but I've since interviewed James Scaramucci III a few times. He got his PhD from Stanford in political sociology, and he did his dissertation on fourth generation warfare. It's exactly what you were talking about a moment ago. But William Lind first wrote about this in the 80s. He later paired up with Christian right Paul Weyrich, big shot in the Christian right. But he said psychological warfare, fourth generation, is aimed at undoing experts, undoing science, and undoing democratic institutions.
There you have it.
That creates uncertainty, chaos, distrust, so that we can get our agenda across. So there's been a systematic attack on experts, science itself, and democratic institutions. And Lind himself met with Trump in the White House when he was president.
Wow.
So this is not hypothesis. This is very intentional. And why do humans need experts? Why? Because we can't know it all.
Right.
I'm not an expert in plumbing. I got to go to a plumber if I have a plumbing issue.
Donald Trump knows all about plumbing, right? Remember the 12 flushes and, just nonsense, Right,
no, but the point is that we have a limited amount of time, a limited amount of brain capacity. We need to trust each other, but we have to evaluate, is this a trustworthy expert or not? And that's where climate science denial got away with so much for so long, because these experts weren't qualified in climate science to say there's no proof. They were just PhDs who acted like they knew everything about it. And 97.8% of all climate scientists said, no, there's incontrovertible proof that there's global warming and it will have catastrophic effects. But we're going to go with 2 people or 25 climate deniers over the 25,000 or more experts. And that's where you said it too. It's a scientific method is a community effort, and people have a hypothesis and everyone else should challenge it to see if it holds water or not. That's the falsifiability piece. And when I did my doctoral dissertation in a quantitative study of the bite model, I wanted people to challenge it. I came up with a very high factor analysis. If you control behavior, information, thoughts, and feelings, you have authoritarian control. That was my thesis. I connected the dots with trafficking, labor and sex trafficking. And a Boston University professor did a study to challenge me, and she came up with the same results, that it is authoritarian control. And for me, this is part of the anchor for how to evaluate what's a healthy group, what's not a healthy group, who's a healthy leader, who's not a healthy leader, is to look at these attributes that are on freedomofmind.com, and anyone can look it up and evaluate for themselves whether or not they're in a relationship where their information is being manipulated or controlled, or phobias are being put in your mind, or you're being propelled to tattle on other people who are in your group that are breaking rules. And there's a whole list.
Yeah.
And so, we have to empower people to be awake, citizens and realize the moment that we're living in is not a time to binge watch videos and play video games. We really are in a crisis.
Absolutely. And I learn every time I hear from you. And I wish we could have presented at the APA this year. I mean, it's so many psychiatrists need to understand these things, like fourth generation psychological warfare, authoritarianism, cults, how we orient ourselves around leaders. Because I think, first of all, everyone, as you know, your personal story is so poignant to me because it
Thanks.
demonstrates how we can all be susceptible to influence
Right.
and dangerous influence. And we need to continuously protect ourselves. I think, luckily, some of the best high schools are putting in media literacy programs and so forth to kind of deconstruct disinformation. But that's
Mm-hmm.
a small
Mm-hmm.
minority of high schools. I mean, and
Right.
this is a growing problem with the internet being influenced by having people push out malicious information. And young people are exposed, but it's probably older people are more polarized by this stuff and less maybe
Yep.
savvy at just discounting what they see on the internet. Uh, you know, so
Yeah. Yeah.
it is.
Exactly.
This is. I say that, and I hope this doesn't offend those who lived through the AIDS crisis, but I say that American psychiatry, the world psychiatry, is facing the equivalent, the mental health equivalent of the AIDS crisis, and our
Hmm.
equivalents of the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, NIAID, are behaving atrociously. And they're kind of standing on protocol and custom rather than responding to the immediate threats. Now, maybe, there's a mild, so the Surgeon General issued a warning, a Surgeon General's warning recommended
On
about social
social
media,
media for
which is
children.
great. I mean, I
Right.
actually wrote a blog post with that literal title. We should have a Surgeon General's warning on social media. I wrote that in 2014. So, so I'm glad, I kind
Wow.
of, hit that, buzzword anyway. But it's great. I mean, it's, so we've got to warn people like these things. The mind is precious and it's fragile. Particularly under circumstances of stress. And I would say right now,
Right.
we can create conditions of stress by scaring people that their lives are in danger with every, little drop of the news that you put into them. And so it is to maintain our stability, we have to have a sense of self. And self comes from
Right.
relationships first. From our very first moment, we're in relationship to each other. So all these things are trying to disrupt the way we relate to each other in democratic, egalitarian ways, and
Right.
substitute a top-down authority with in-groups and out-groups and all of this.
Right.
Um, you know,
Yep. And the identity politics. Do you know Braver Angels? Do you know that group by any
that rings a bell,
chance?
but I don't remember. Yeah.
So Braver Angels, I believe it was started by a therapist actually at the beginning. I think it was 2016. And he would organize reds and blues,
Oh, right.
Democrats and
Right.
Republicans,
Yeah.
get them in rooms to meet
Yeah.
each other, to listen to each other, to converse with each other. It's exactly what you were talking about earlier about contact theory,
Mhm.
that if you meet people and see them as human beings, realize they're parents too, they have the same struggles, they have issues with sleep or they have issues with their boss or whatever, you can cut through so much of the emotional angst that the other is so dangerous and horrible, because I really believe we're stronger together.
Mhm.
And I really encourage people to have trust pods of family and friends, but don't include just people who think like you. Include other people with diversity, a lawyer, an accountant, other political views. And you can rotate a position of contrarian,
Mhm.
like each week, that somebody just takes the contrarian position to argue the other side of whatever, and just keep our brains fresh and also be prepared to change your mind if the evidence warrants it. Don't confuse your ego with your beliefs.
Right. We are more than our opinions. And it's more important to be related than right. In fact, you can be right or related, right or happy. So our disconnection is at the root of suffering, and the opposite of suffering is belonging. So, how can we create belonging despite having different views? And this is torn. Politics has torn families apart, people, friend groups apart. People who can't talk to each other. It used to be that you couldn't date somebody from a different religion or a different ethnicity. Now it's like you're least likely to date somebody outside your political preference. So this is
Yeah.
it's become the clear the line in the sand, so to speak. And I mean, I think we need more tools of first of all, winning the election so that we can have the conditions for the kind of empathy, curiosity, and deeper belonging that you're talking about. I think if it's
Yeah.
modeled from top to bottom, we can have it, as opposed to sending our angry birds to Congress, and
Yeah.
letting them yell at each other and getting entertainment points out of it, which is absurd. I mean, we can't function that way. But so much right now is because of amplified because of social media, is about attention, getting attention. And I think we've got to get more mature than that, and
Yeah.
we've got our attention and our values have to be motivated by positive things. So maybe, I hope that if we win this election, there's a silver lining that more people will have come into the deeper kind of realization about the kinds of things we're talking about. And, what
Mm-hmm.
is democracy? I mean, we really have to live it individually, not just,
Yeah.
not just assume that everything's okay. I mean, there are school boards at threat. There are, all sorts of local elections where people are, advancing very horrible causes,
Yeah.
and they're amassing their following. And so we unfortunately, democracy takes a lot of time. We have to really be engaged, and
Yeah.
and put our money where our
Yeah.
mouth is
Book
and everything. Right?
banning.
Exactly. Yeah.
Book banning. Can you believe book
Right.
banning in the United States of
Right.
America? I
Right.
don't know. That it so rubs me the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole I do also want to say, Ravi, for me, it's not a left or right issue anymore. It's authoritarianism versus human
Mm-hmm.
rights and rule of law issue. Because I see people on the progressive left that are acting as authoritarian as I see on the right. It's not
Sure.
just,
Well,
the extremist right.
self-righteousness is common to human beings, right? And we always, I can be self-righteous sometimes, that can happen. It's,
I've never seen you
well,
self-righteous.
it can
Sorry,
happen,
buddy.
right? We all can feel very strongly about something, but, it's like, then we like take a breath and, relax and, try to, understand other points of view. That's okay. But sure, I have certain, things that'll get my dander up for sure. I mean, people insult or
Yep.
harm vulnerable people. I tend to be outspoken about that. I hope I continue to have the conditions. And that's one of the problems with the Goldwater rule, is that even though it supposedly only officially applies to American Psychiatric Association members, it creates this effect around it, the Goldwater rule effect. And
Good point.
and that
Yeah.
can be used by universities, institutions, medical boards, etc., to suddenly say, oh, we have a problem with the way this psychiatrist has used their political speech. We don't think they're being ethical. We're going to call them in for dismissal or removal of their license or something like that. That actually happened to Bandy Lee. I mean, the administrators above her at Yale cited the Goldwater rule in dismissing her from her faculty position of 17 years. So, I mean, and she
Yeah.
wasn't even a member of the APA.
Right.
But so
Yeah.
it's,
That
yeah,
was
yeah,
egregious. That was egregious. As we're beginning to wrap up, Ravi, I'm going to put you on the spot for two questions, if I
okay.
may. Um, So, if you had a chance to stand in front of all the powers at the American Psychiatric Association and they said, okay, Ravi, if you were running the APA, what changes would you make?
So, well, I think since the major one would be to eliminate completely the Goldwater rule and instead put forward an affirmatory stance towards physicians' First Amendment rights and protected speech. As such that
Mm-hmm.
they are further encouraged to use their expertise and knowledge for the benefit of society, while of course knowing that all speech has potential consequences. So you have to be wise about it, but we're not going to get in the way of your conscience. Who's to how what kind of organization can know what's in the best interest of any group or any particular minoritized psychiatrist? I think it's a horrible way to treat our own psychiatrists, and it's an infantilization. So I would say eliminate the Goldwater rule immediately.
Right. Anything else to the APA?
Yeah, I would say get over your political phobia. We're living in political times. Politics affects mental health, and we need to be brave and not adhere to the supposed old line of the blank screen analyst, abstinent and neutral. No, we're not. We all have biases, and the only way we explore these biases and get above them to get at more objective and more compassionate ways of understanding each other are through engagement. I
Yeah.
think to get over the political phobia which you've come into. Yeah.
Great. And how about, I mean, one thing that was astounding to me when I went to the APA was just in the exhibit hall, how many drugs were
Mm.
in the exhibit hall. And now there's a push to introduce psychedelics, whether it's cannabis or psilocybin or MDMA. I'd love to hear your opinions about
Well,
like
yeah,
the big
yeah.
pharma stuff versus the psychedelic assisted. And
I,
what do you
I
think?
think we do have to kick the tires around everything that we recommend to patients. That obviously industry has an interest in promoting itself. And the APA has scaled back. There used to be 10 years ago or more, there used to be industry sponsored dinners and all of this stuff. And that was eliminated under ethical guidelines and guidance. So,
Right.
so that's good, but it's still the hall is there. We do get the ads are there in our publications, and so I think we do have to kick the tires and be responsible. And there are some very knowledgeable, skillful, scientific psychiatrists who have raised doubts about the efficacy of many medications. I still believe in medications that many, I've seen them work. I feel they work. I believe the
Yep.
evidence, but I think the scientific method. We always have to prove it, not just stand on
Yeah.
protocol. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And do you want to opine about the push to
Oh, psilocybin. Yeah, I
psychedelics?
mean, I've heard a lot of strong sales pitches for it. I think there's promise. The recent FDA or the panel recommended to the FDA that they not be given approval. But I think it's worth kicking around. They
That's for the MDMA,
Right,
I
MDMA,
believe.
right. Sorry. I think it's worth. There's lots of scientific studies under survey, under research. I would like to, see if there can be efficacy, but I think that usually things like this, if it's, there's it's not a cure-all. It's being sold as, I heard one guy say, well, in 20 years we'll be free of trauma. We'll be curing trauma as fast as it's
Yeah.
created, and because of psilocybin. And I think it's really overselling. And of course, these things are often not being used in scientific settings, etc. So, and there
Right.
are negative effects, and that's totally underplayed. There are negative
Right.
effects, longer lasting effects, which have barely been documented. So I think we've got to
Yeah.
know about those. Yeah,
Go
yeah.
slower. And lastly, if you had the Biden administration's ear, What would you be telling? How would you be advising them in terms of what they're doing and what they need to be doing more of?
Well, I think they've been doing a great job on a lot of fronts. But I think to just hone in on what we've been talking about, the mental health, the mass mental health effects of leadership, of news and media. We've got to have some version of the Fairness in Media Act back. I mean, we just,
Yes.
so I would think that some form of responsibility with the FCC, with social media, especially my book is on social media. And if I've written a lot about the Project 2025 playbook, etc., on my Eastwind Ezine blog. You can find that. And
Yeah.
so I think we need to really put some guardrails around. I think so
Yeah.
it's very important. I think there are thorny issues of First Amendment rights involved, but I think we can solve those if we're responsible. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just add my own pitch, which if I had the Biden administration attention, I'd say we need to call a public health emergency. We have a mind control
Mm-hmm.
virus. And as we deal with viruses that kill people, we need to develop inoculation
Mm-hmm.
programs. We need to develop intervention remedies, and we need to develop recovery treatment facilities and such. Destigmatize the idea that you have to be weak or dumb or stupid or
Absolutely.
uneducated to accept a lie and get indoctrinated into an authoritarian cult of any kind. Stop calling names of the other people and just like hold a higher standard of like, really, we have to live together
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
because the alternative is
Absolutely.
too horrible.
Yeah, abusive power subordinates and eliminates compassion, and compassion is the
Mm,
source of life and survival. So I think this is a question of survival. All the things you're talking about. How do we, get responsible power in place, which includes compassion and empathy,
yeah.
and intellect and understanding. All of this. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Ravi Chandra, psychiatrist. Thank you.
All right.
San Francisco, wisdom, and so appreciate you, my brother.
Thank you, Steve, my brother.
Keep up
Yes. All right.
the good
All
effort.
right.
Okay.
Great.
Take care.
Thank you.
Steve Hassan here. It's been decades since my family rescued me from the Moonies. I've been at this for over 47 years. The need has never been greater. If you're able, please consider hitting the super thanks button below, and it'll help us to do better. Every penny will help us toward our goal of educating the planet about undue influence. Remember, it's your mind, only you should control it.